Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has had a very good first part of the week. Welcome to another Looped In with Maritza. My name is Maritza Gertie, and I can formally announce now that I am the Deputy Director of Parent Power and Outreach with the National Parents Union. Um, I am still going to be heavily involved in speaking to families and guardians of school age children with regards to what their demands are for their children's educational, what I call educational career. And as always, I'm going to be giving you some information that I hope will be of interest to you and will make you want to delve into it further to see if you'd like to join us in our fight for better education for all of our children. For those of you that are interested in being a part of the National Parents Union, please go onto the website, www.nationalparentsunion.org. The website has been revamped. It is very user-friendly. It has specific tabs for anything that may be of interest to you. We currently have a quite a few campaigns that are currently running, and we'll also be adding a few more campaigns starting tomorrow and in the weeks to come. So the hope is that for any of you that are interested in any of the things that you see on the website, it is very user-friendly with regards to being a part of that campaign. You can be part of multiple campaigns, and it is very easy to share the information out within your networks or with your family and friends. So if you're interested, again, nationalparentsunion.org is the website where you would just need to be into to be able to see all the things that we have available for everyone that becomes a member. If you have any information that you'd like to find out about with regards to the National Parents Union, feel free to go on to info@npunion.org, and someone does man that email, and you will be able to ask a question, get some information, and we'd be happy to help you with that regard. Again, we are still in the midst of a pandemic, so please, my only personal message to all of you is to please stay safe and wear your mask, family. If you are able to get vaccinated, please do so. If you're able to get the booster, please do so. And if you are unsure of the status of anyone you come into close contact with, please wear your mask to make sure that you keep yourself safe and your loved ones when you get home to them every single day. We want to make sure that everyone stays as healthy as possible. For those that also are interested, National Parents Union has several pages on Facebook. We have the National Parents Union Facebook page, but we also have regional pages. And we're broken down into the Northeast region, the Southern region, the Midwest region, and we will very soon have a Far West regional page. So if you live in that particular part of the country, aside from going on to the regular National Parents Union Facebook page, it will now be you can also have the ability to be log into and be a member of the regional pages for your specific region. But please remember, being on the Facebook page does not mean that you are also a National Parents Union member. That would require you to go onto the website to be able to become a member of National Parents Union. Now, speaking of campaigns, we currently have the Every Family Votes campaign. Family, please remember that in many parts of the country, there are elections going on every 6 months. So you have the opportunity of selecting an individual that you feel whose views and work are aligned with your values, what you're looking for in your communities. For all of you that that have voted in the past, for all of you that have run in the past for an elected seat, again, thank you. For those of you that are interested in learning more about the EPIC campaign, I'm going to put into the chat the link for you to go into and check it out. So hopefully you'll find something there that is of interest to you as well. Some of you that do work in the education space are very familiar with the Edu Recovery Hub. I'm going to add their link on here. And this hub displays state-by-state recovery information and provides insight into smart investments that best serve students, families, and educators to ensure that all schools recover stronger and every student benefits. So I am going to also add that into the chat. Hey, Miss Rita, I love seeing folks that I know on here saying hello. Thank you so much for tuning in, Miss Rita. I really appreciate you and your support. Now, family, for those of you that don't know, if you see these all over the place across several websites, social media platforms, this week, for those of you that do not know, is National School Choice Week. This is the week in which we commemorate the ability for all of us as family and caregivers of school-age children, where we have the ability to choose where our children get their education. We must ensure that our right to choose, whether it's public, whether it's private, whether it's parochial, whether it's charter, whether it is a local district school, we must make sure that we have the ability to choose where our children will attend school, regardless again of where they live. We have to ensure that that choice remains in the hands of parents, guardians, and families. If we don't make sure that our choice for education continues, what will end up happening is many of the things that we want for our children will not happen. So we need to make sure that we honor and represent and champion those that are in the fight to keep school choice alive for all of our families. I'd also like to announce that tomorrow, National Parents Union, along with Great Schools, will be launching a campaign. And with it will be the open letter the National Parents Union has sent to Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. So please look out for any information where you will then have the ability to join in that demand of that open letter. And to learn more about it, please go on to the National Parents Union website. Now, family, please excuse me. I'm going to do something I haven't done before, and I hope this actually works. My guest is a very, in my opinion, a very unique person, in a sense that something that I saw on a social media platform that he recited, that he wrote, touched me so much that I had to reach out to him. I had to find out who he was. And I asked him if he could talk to me. And I was very honored by the fact that he said yes. Now, I do have to give a little warning. The language is kind of strong. So please bear with me. But I feel that it is needed. I feel that it should be viewed. And please, anyone that's watching, if you can't hear it, please let me know and I'll immediately stop sharing and go right into the conversation with the person that made this very strong piece of art for me. Hey, Tabby. So I'm going to do this right now. So please cross your fingers and hope it works. Let me know. So I'm going to share my screen. Share. And
on why Mexicans should not use the N-word. Because Emiliano Zapata was part black, because Lupita Nyong'o was born in Mexico, because Indian and black runaway slaves formed quilombos that fought off slave hunters for decades, because they fill their prisons with black and brown bodies just like they did their ships. The criminal justice system is the new middle passage. Police brutality, the new genocide. Because Vicente Guerrero, the first black president in North America, threatened war against the United States if they tried capturing any runaway slave in Mexico, because La Bamba was an African song sung by slaves in the fields of Veracruz. Hermano, I like hip hop too. And I understand that your favorite rapper drops this word every other line, so tell me this. How many times have you smiled every time someone's called you a beaner? Hermana, does it make you want to wave your hands up in the air like you just don't care when someone calls you a wetback? Come on, we are so fly, they call us illegal aliens. We are so sexy, they call us dirty Mexicans. You should not play music for your ignorance when you say this word. Does it feel as if you have a cotton gin fan tied around your tongue? Does your mouth feel as bloody as Foobell Station? Does it feel like you're a strange fruit, a broken branch dangling, swaying and surrounded by clansmen and children cheering because there is one less of you, hermano y hermana? They used to hang us too for questioning orders, for rejecting white men, for acting too brown. And I understand that you grew up in the barrio, that it is hard to see a link between a black struggle and ours. And for this, they have given you number 13. Blue and red, black and yellow, same tactics they used 500 years ago. They teach us now so that we can finish killing each other off. And I know that it is hard to see a link between a black struggle and ours. And for this, they have given you shitty schools that are waiting to spit you out. They invest more in your failure than in your success, but you are so much more than this. So much more than any news, than any tree that they can find. Your mouth does not have to speak as if it had a burning cross for a tongue. I know you have an inferno for a throat. I've seen this when you raise your hand to question, hey, mister, why does the policeman keep stopping my uncle? Hey, mister, why does the government want to deport my family? You have so much power in your voice, so much rage in the ocean that sleeps in your mouth. So let the moon pull the waves to wash away the master's language, to turn this water into a typhoon that their walls and their guns will not be able to contain. And then they will know the teachings that they have tried so hard to educate out of us, but that our ancestors always knew. That black and brown have always been and will fucking always be beautiful.
Woo! Family. So now allow me to bring on my guest, and I will have him introduce himself. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh, for anyone that does not know who you are, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Alejandro Jimenez. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm an educator, originally from Mexico, from undocumented. I live in the in New Mexico now, in Santa Fe. But yeah, I write. I was also I grew up as a farm worker in Oregon with my family and stuff like that until I went up to college. And so, yeah, that's what I do with my life, in arts and education and stuff like that. So just trying to make the world a better place.
Well, I can tell you, and I told you when you and I spoke that when I heard that, I mean, it gave me goosebumps now watching it again, honestly, because people do not realize how powerful certain words are. So for those that do not know your story or the reasons why you wrote that poem, can you explain? Because I know the story, but I'd like you to tell it. What made you? What pushed you? What was the impetus for you to write that?
So the poem is about 2012. I don't know. It's about, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years old. It's when I was living. So I lived in Denver for 10 years, working there as a student advisor at a high school, and it was like 99.7 Mexican students, right? Or students of, Mexican heritage or whatever, So it was like the southwest side of Denver. For those of you who know Denver, like Federal, the south side, southwest is just very, mostly like newer immigrants from Mexico. A lot of folks in Central America as well, Vietnamese folks, seen a lot more refugees as well from different African countries. But so I work with a lot of students, like I said, Mexican, and they would just use the N-word, like Mexicans use way, way this, way that, but like instead it was like the N-word, right? And I was like, yo, like, why using that? Do you understand what that word comes from? Do you understand, and try to link like, hey, like the reason why we're getting deported is the same reason why Black folks are getting shot and like nothing's happening to the police, that shoots them, right? And why there are more, Black males in prison right now than there ever were slaves, right? And so I was like, do you see the links? And they're like, well, like, not really. I was like, come on, and like to add to this, right? These were Denver's very segregated, right? And so there wasn't. There was like 2 Black kids in a whole school, right? And so my students didn't have a lot of, what do you call it? Like a lot of exposure to just Black folks in general, Black culture in general, right? And so aside from like mainstream hip hop, right, where every rapper is using the N-word, and even rappers who are not Black using the N-word, right? And so this was written as a letter to my students, whom I worked with for 5-6 years, trying to, connect the dots of how, yeah, we have this shared history or shared struggle, I guess, but we also have this shared history of not just resistance, but beautiful things that we've created together. There's a line in the poem about, how like these runaway slaves, both like, from Africa and from here, indigenous folks would form quilombos, right? That's what they were called in Brazil. In Mexico, they were called palenques, right? So to just resist and create community, right? And so that was my attempt at trying to teach them something other than just having a conversation with them. So, okay, conversations are not working. Let's write this poem. So
yes, and I yeah, in Colombia they're also called palenques. I learned that as well. Myself, coming from the Northeast, between New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, I was fortunate. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a city in North Jersey where it was virtually a melting pot of every Latin American ethnicity we were exposed to. But at that time, when I was coming up, the majority of folks, you were either Peruvian, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, and then everyone else was African American, and a very small percentage of white folks where I grew up. And I never used the word because I guess because I still am such an avid reader. I read things, and for me, it was just a negative connotation. So it never came out of my mouth. Even in jest, I think I shared it with you that I would get in arguments. I mean, I have friends I've had friends that our friendship has spanned like over 30 years. And I've had arguments with some of them because they thought it was okay to use it as slang. And it's to the point where I said, you know what? If you use the word again, I can't associate with you anymore. Because I don't think it's respectful. It's like I wouldn't want anyone calling me a spit or a wetback, whatever negative connotation they would want to put to someone that is of Latino or Hispanic descent. I wouldn't want that. So why would I then go ahead and repeat and use a word that I know would hurt anyone that I care about. All my sons are black. My daughter's black. You know, Dominicans, you know, people from the Caribbean come from African descent as well. So the use of the word, even in jest, offends many. And I know that the power of words can really determine how people are treated and how people treat you. So when I saw that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to speak with him. And then when I got to, you know, I read the bio you sent me, and after our discussion, I was like, he's an educator. And to me, this poem was like a love letter to these students, to basically let them know in the strongest way possible, in the most eloquent way that I saw, for them to say, hey, this is not something that you should perpetuate. This is not something that you should continue. And when you mentioned a couple of things you mentioned with regards to hip hop music, which for young people is their go-to, words are powerful, and they repeat it continuously because they memorize the lyrics. So if they continuously hear certain words, and I'm like, well, how about we change the words and make it popular to use more uplifting words to, you know, to refer to each other. And even my son is one of my sons, my middle son is a hip hop artist, and he tries not to. And I told him, I said, do what you have to do, son, with your music, as long as you don't degrade women and you don't curse. And he's been, I would say, 95% accurate in his career.
That's awesome.
In doing things. So, and I appreciate that from him. But we want people to, excuse me, really understand that words are powerful. Words mean something, especially upon children. You know, the power of words is something that children emulate, children imitate what they hear. So if they hear adults or their older siblings, their older relatives saying words that are derogatory against anyone, they're going to think it's okay to say it, and then it just is going to perpetuate the problem.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that you bring that up, right? Because that's something like whenever I'm doing workshops or just working with students or whatever, right? In the roles that I hold now as a counselor or most recently as a counselor, like it's that idea of words are powerful, right? And you know, and I was actually reading one time, like recently, right? Like within the last 4 or 5 years, that social linguists, right, and like sociologists are like coming up with this new research, right? That like for the longest time, we thought, right, our academia thought that like our thoughts influenced what came out of our mouth. Now they're finding out, like in research, right? Like this is not just like they're doing research, or like scholars are doing research. So it's peer reviewed and put out by like multiple venues or multiple different filtration, whatever you want to call it, right? And now it's saying that it's the opposite now. We may not really believe something, but once we say it, then it gets ingrained in us. Once we hear it, whether we say it or whether we hear it from someone else, then we believe it.
Yes.
And I was like, holy crap, that's crazy, you know, to me, you know. So like, again, goes to the power of words, right? So if I hear something negative, I'm going to internalize that more than just thinking something negative, right? And so I'm like, whoa, like that's like, it just blew my mind, right? That like, and again, not just sociologists doing it, but like linguists are actually like also social linguists coming up with this research and putting this stuff out there. And I was like, wow, like that is really crazy, right? To think about that, right? And a conversation I always have with students, especially you being an immigrant and students who are immigrants themselves. I'm like, look, like how do they treat us, right? They say illegal. What does that mean, right? If something's illegal, what do you do with it, right? Or you ban it. Cool. Guns are illegal. Drugs are illegal. You ban it, right? Okay, so if they call us illegal, they want to ban us, right? Like they want to throw us away, right? And so like, and then they add alien. Out of this world, not from here. So to me, you know, and so we have this conversation with students. They're like, "Oh crap, mister!" Like I'm like, "Yeah, like you know? And so I'm like, this is how words get ingrained. We don't realize it, right? So if we dehumanize someone, take someone's humanity away, whether it's the N-word, whether it's whatever the, like any slur towards women or whatever, gay folks or whatever, then we're taking the humanity away. So it's easier for us to throw them in the trash, or to not care about them when they get shot.
Yes.
Or to not to care about them when something horrible happens to them, right? So because we don't see their humanities because of these words we use, right? So like this study is just like, or different things that I read about, I'm like, wow, like this is just baffling to me. Like I wish I was a psychologist, I could understand more things, and how the mind works and stuff. But
and you're absolutely right, because another word that I refuse to use, excuse me, in regards to referring to women, is bitch. I don't use it in jest. I don't use it amongst my very close girlfriends, my sisters. I don't use it. I don't write it. I don't refer, when I see it's something about it, because you look it up in a dictionary. And I always refer to that because when I went to Catholic school when I was younger, and a form of punishment for them was to make us write word for word from the dictionary. So aside from it helping me learn words, and how to spell it and how to pronounce it and pronunciation, because my first language was not English, it was Spanish. I didn't start learning English until I was 6 or 7 years old. So if Maritza got in trouble and had to start writing, from the dictionary 10 times each, the word, how it was used as a noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, what the meaning was, the word bitch in there, it says female dog. So just as you said, dehumanizing. So when somebody says, a woman says, I'm that bitch, it turns me off. And I try to then, if I know them personally, I'm like, hey, well, why do you use I ask, why do you use the word? Why do you feel the need to use that word to describe yourself? Why not queen? Why not, goddess? Why not, any other entity, any other descriptive word for yourself? But to choose a word, even men, when they say, oh, that's my dog, why? And I don't know, I guess it's because I'm very literal and I try not to be judgmental, but I guess in that aspect, I do become judgmental, because I see you as a person that's not going to be dehumanized by using a word that may refer to you as an animal. Anything other than a human being, it really is hard for folks to say that. I mean, I'm looking at a comment here, and I'm going to share this too. I'm going to show this comment by Tabby, and she's like, I'm a third generation Irish on my mother's side, and even though the Irish immigrants were treated unfairly, it wasn't the same magnitude. However, we forgot how we were treated as our culture was stripped, thrown into white for systemic power in the US. And she's like, digital hugs for all our fellow humans. Thank you, Tabby, so much. I mean, these are the kinds of things that, people don't realize, just as you said. It may not be so ingrained, but once we hear it, we get so used to hearing it. And then we become anesthetized. Where we become numb to it. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. I don't want my 5-year-old coming in from school and saying words that dehumanize him or anyone around him. I want him to be able to say, you know what, that's an amazing person. That's a nice person. That's a great person. That's a funny person. He can even say that's a mean person. But I would not want him to then use negative connotations for him to describe a person. And I guess because I'm very literal, like I said, anyone that has to learn a different language, you become very literal. And people think some people think it's funny. My husband still thinks it's funny when I say to him, I'm a very literal person. So if you say something to me, I'm going to take it word for word. And because I'm bilingual, I flip it automatically. I don't know what it is, but I will flip it automatically in my head. And I'm like, hey, everything, I translate everything in like milliseconds in my mind from Spanish to English. And, you know, that may happen for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that knows more than one language, it's just something that automatically happens and clicks in your head, and we don't know why. I consider it a gift for anyone that's able to learn more than one language, regardless of what the language is. So it's become very literal to the point where, hey, it took offense. I can give you an example for those that speak Spanish. Classroom. If you Google classroom and get the Spanish translation, what'll come out is aula, but an aula is a cage. So if I see the word classroom, I'm not going to say aula because cannot imagine children or anyone in a cage. I would say salon. And I was actually questioned about that years ago when I worked for a charter school organization. They did a flyer. And they put they were talking about, oh, come to our school, enroll in our school, come look at our classrooms. So they translated it to Spanish. And I'm like, do you know you're inviting people to come look at cages? And they're like, what? What do you mean? I said, that's why it's very important to speak with someone that actually understands the language that you're trying to communicate in, so that you make sure you don't use offensive language. So suffice it to say that they paid a whole lot of money for a printing job and they had to reprint everything. Because I was like, I am not sharing this. Yeah. It's not gonna go in one person's mailbox. It's not gonna go on one person's car. I'm not gonna give it out to one person I run across until this is changed. And these are the kinds of things that and I understand generational things. Like, you know, I don't know how old you are, Alejandro, but you know, I'm a what am I? A Gen X. Yes. I'm 50.
No, so, I'm a millennial. So I think it's like, you know, I think we're like the generation that tried to, like, I don't know, make words cool, even if they were like, you know, we're going to reclaim. And it's like, cool. Like, you know, and in my students, I'm like, you know, they tried to say like, wow, we're using that something cool. And I'm like, well, you like what? And like, it would be different if you're Black, but like, you're not. And, you know, and the question I always asked them, I was like, well, like, if I called you Beaner, would you like, you're like, oh no, that's really bad. I was like, why? You know, and they're like, well, mister, we're not using the ER at the end, you know, we're using with the A, you know, and that's cool. And I'm like, okay, but if I say Bina, and they're like, well, no, why? You know, and it's like, well, and I'm like, because you don't see Black people as human. That's why, you know, like, you know, like, you racist kid, you know, like, even though you don't realize it, you know, but I love you and I want to make you, you know, like, understand, right? And so, like, it's really interesting, you know, and when you were talking about just like the language, right, and the power of words and stuff like that, and something that I think about a lot is this idea, and it's like, I think very common, this idea of how trauma is passed down in like 4 generations or something like that, right? Something traumatic happens and then the family still feels it 4 generations down the road, right? And I'm like, okay, like, but even in simpler terms, sometimes when I'm like, cool, like, if I grow up, you know, thinking less of myself because of the words that I'm, you know, that like, or portrayal that I see in media, right? Whether it's social media or news or whatever, school, right? About my people, then I always think, I was like, what does that do to the generations after that if you don't deal with that, right? If you don't say, no, we're not, you know, like, there was like a teacher in or somewhere, I forget what it was, I saw the news like a couple of days ago, that they actually handed out they had to finish like a sentence, right? So it was elementary schoolers, and they had to finish the sentence, and one of the sentences was, Mexicans are ugly. And then whatever and they're like, you have to finish, like, you know, or I think it was like, you're ugly because you're Mexican or something like that. And I'm like, okay, this was like a homework assignment. Like, one, does this teacher just printed it out without knowing? Or did they like purposely like think that, right? Or whoever created this, right? And so a lot of times I just think about this, right? When I get, I work with mostly high school students, right? All high school students. And when they come to me, especially in my last role, I was working with a lot of seniors, and I'm like, you have really good grades. You can blah, 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 do this. And regardless of race, regardless of socioeconomic background, like a lot of students come already with like, you're already defeated because they had an experience in the education system. I was like, oh yeah, in elementary school, they told me I was going to do this, whether it's come from parents or from the school system themselves or whatever, right? And I'm like, no, like this is, like, it's just interesting to see it even just in like their first 12 years of education, right? Of being like, no, I can't do this. And I'm like, yeah, you can, and a lot of times, I don't mean to like pat myself on the back, but a lot of times I'm like the first person that has said it to them. A lot of times I'm the first brown person that said it to them, and that's really sad, right? And again, they always say, oh, they use these words to bring me down. They use these specific phrase to bring me down. They use this, these idioms to bring me down, right? And I'm like, that's really sucky, but that's also a really good college essay and scholarship essay. Let's flip it on its side and or whatever. So. But it's really interesting, this idea of just words, right? And how they can just carry down, or how we can carry them.
And you mentioned something that when a student said to you that in their early educational experience, they were basically put in a box or labeled as something. So they didn't think that they'd be able to do anything beyond 12th grade other than what they were labeled as in elementary school. That's very interesting because I know of a lot of adults that because of a school experience that was negative, because of something that someone told them when they were a child that never left their psyche, they feel intimidated about going to a school and speaking to an administrator at a school because it brings them back. It's like a form of PTSD for them. It brings everything back, that memory, that feeling of being made to feel less than or inferior because of what someone that they thought was that was supposed to educate them or be supportive of them said something to them that was so hurtful that they don't feel comfortable as an adult going to a school to advocate for their child or their children. And that's why I always, I'm always the first one to say, for schools, for educators, for admins, make that school experience for the adults good as well. Have it where a parent or guardian feels comfortable with going to their school when they have, I don't care if it's a question, I don't call them complaints, I call it concerns. You may have a bad day, but when that person is calling the school, the student is not only your customer, but so is that parent and guardian. So guess what? If you don't treat them with respect and courtesy, that could be the difference in a good conversation and a bad conversation. And I say that because in another life, I worked in customer service for many years, and I realized how very quickly a conversation can change depending on how I treated that person when they called in. So I always took it as, it's an old adage: treat others the way you would want to be treated yourself. And it's the same thing with words. If I don't want to be referred to in a derogatory way, I won't refer to others in derogatory ways. So it's like I would like for us, that anybody that's watching that are the adults, if you see it, if you hear it, try their best to change it. And some folks may say, well, that's the only kind of language people understand. Some people understand. That's the only language some people were taught. But I honestly feel as long as we're breathing, we're constantly learning. So we can learn a different way to communicate. It's all for the better. And then we have to keep in mind that we have little ones that are watching us, little ones that are coming up behind us, and they emulate us. So if we change the language to a more positive one, our children would also then emulate that and use it. And my mom and dad, or my abuela or my abuelo, they don't like using that word. Why do you feel you need to use it? And it becomes a conversation and a learning lesson for everybody.
And it really does, and I think, something that is strike me about like your comments is being intentional, right? About having those conversations, and then, with whatever it is, right? Especially if we're talking this idea around language, right? And students in schools, I think one of my favorite positions that I've had, was as a restorative practices coordinator in the school. So I was / academic counselor, and then / restorative practices coordinator. So it was like really beautiful. It was really hard, but really beautiful to be like, cool. Like when there was those instances of like people calling each other names or whatever, then those conversations were like, I feel like the deepest, conversations are like, oh, why? And then we go into like, and then like, cool. Now you understood what happened. Now we're going to go to that person and apologize and have a conversation, and all three of us, right? And I'll just kick it, and like, y'all like take it, I'll facilitate, ask questions, whatever, right? And so it's really beautiful to be like, yeah, like I didn't see you as or whatever, right? And by that time, like I feel like, as high school students, yeah, like they're able to understand things in the deeper level. I think all students are able, regardless of grade, able to understand things in their own depth, right? Especially with, whatever they are, developmentally or whatever. But like, high school students are like, oh, wow, like I can touch this reality now. I'm going to touch it in 3 years, right? Reality, right? A lot of students, are younger, have been living in like really, harmful realities for a long time, but like, they're like, oh, cool. Like I know I can see how this plays out in the world. Right. And so like, I've loved this intentional, spaces and conversations, right? And a lot of times when like teachers or students or parents as well, they're like, well, when, how do I have those conversations? And it's like, it's for me, I'm like, just ask why that word.
Yes.
And then more questions will come up. Like if you don't have to be an expert, you don't have to know everything, right? But it's just like, why did you use that word?
Yes.
Why do you feel like, whatever it is. And then, and then parents like, oh, and teachers, I'm like, yeah, like, and understand there's like a lot of pressure in all of our lives, right? Whether it's, like I'm a teacher, I got 30 students, like, can I stop to have this intentional conversation with the student? Chances no, right? Because there are 30 other students or whatever. And same thing with parents and families. And so I'm like, well, but like, I don't know, but then that opens a whole other like conversation we could have about like, staffing and like, funding for schools and stuff. But
oh yeah, that if you have that conversation, I'll be happy to bring you back on, because that is something that right now specifically, I mentioned it, that National Parents Union is in the throes of a campaign right now where we're demanding to know on behalf of families, where is this money? What's going on with this money? What's going on with the funding? In my state, in Pennsylvania, the state is being sued because the funding formula for students in the state of Pennsylvania is very disparate. So, you can live in the suburbs and they can allocate over $20,000, $25,000 per student. And then in Philadelphia, it may be 18 or 19,000, and people wonder why we're not getting certain things done educationally. And it could be happening across the country where it it depends on what zip code you live in, and I think that's absolutely horrible. That
Right. And
a child's zip code will then dictate what kind of education they'll receive.
and we've been talking a lot about the power of words, right? Not to be cliche, right, or anything, but like also the power of numbers, right? Like
Oh,
I'm worth that much and that person's worth that much. Like,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
okay, like that's how much you care, right? It's just it's just it's just really interesting, for like, and I saw this in the school, where like I wrote this poem for these students, right? We had a spectrum. We were a really small school. We had a spectrum of schools. We were a public charter school. There was just like basically like anybody can come here. It wasn't like, it wasn't like a traditional, or like how we think about charter school in the sense of like a lot, like you have to do anything like that. It was just like, you just get in regardless, right?
Yeah.
But we were really poorly funded. And even though we were like, my girlfriend at one point worked at like a competing magnet school. And we actually, 2 years after I left, like our school actually outperformed them on the standardized test, which I'm like, whatever, standardized test, whatever, but that's a marker, right? But I'm like, wow, you have like these like, mostly like English language learners, came to the country 5-6 years ago and like are performing these students who are like have so many like resources available to them, and we have to like I don't know if I'm gonna have a position next year, or any of us, and so it's really interesting, that like students still able to do so much with so little.
Yeah, and that's part of that. I mean, it's not a very popular word to use as much, but that grit and also resilience. Now this is me personally. I don't think that should be an excuse to give children
Not
less.
at all.
Oh, they're resilient. They can handle it. They'll be able to deal with it. They shouldn't have to.
Yeah, and then my question, because I agree with you, and then my question was like, well, why do you think we have to be resilient? Why do you think they have to be resilient? Right. And then there's a whole like, conversation of like, are you born with resiliency? Do you develop it? Right. Or whatever. Right. But like, regardless, I'm like, why do you think students and families have had to be resilient? And, in terms of the education system, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure every other system, that we can think of as well, right? Like, so I always think that it's like, I'm like, oh, like, I don't know. I just get frustrated when that stuff comes up because I'm like, oh, come on, like.
And this is why I'm purposeful in my attempts whenever I have this platform available to me, that I choose different topics. I choose people that people that view this may not run into every day. A great person like you that I happen to see, that you probably were like, who is this lady sending me this email? And it wasn't. It was based on someone else posted, because I remember you telling me, I think you had no idea that you were being recorded when you recited the poem, and then someone posted it, like you said, 5 years ago, and it just went viral, and thousands of people saw it. I mean, and 5 years later, I just happened to be going up on my TikTok, on my For You page, and I see this, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And I immediately said, I have to find this person. And I felt a little weird. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually Googling this man's name and seeing if he has a Twitter. And I saw that you had an Instagram. And I was like, ah. And then I saw you had a website. And I don't have producers lining up my guests, and all I do is ask and introduce myself and say, hey, would you like to have a conversation? Because I think that your message in that poem is very important. It continues to be absolutely relatable. Even 5 years later, it's going to continue to be relatable 20 years from now. There are certain words that a lot of people don't realize, because they're so used to hearing it on a consistent basis, that they think it's okay. And in an effort to try to educate the masses, I was like, hey, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about it because it's always been something that for me, I've always felt strongly about. So the fact that I was able to see someone articulate in words so eloquently what I've always thought about on how certain things that we say can hurt, can demean, can dehumanize are not okay. And you did it. So I thank you for that very much.
No,
I
thank
mean,
you so much.
I thank you for replying back to me, for taking the time to have a conversation prior to today, so that we can get to touch base, and you can vet me and say, you know, I got to see who this lady is. Who is she? Who is she? And what is she about? But I can't believe that 50 minutes have already gone by. And that's what I like about this, that I enjoy and I appreciate the fact that that folks like you, folks that have agreed so graciously to honor me on my podcast, that we have a conversation that is so flowing, so energetic, so transparent, that time flies by for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost 5 o'clock already. But if someone wanted to reach out to you, how would they do so?
Alejandro AlejandroPoetry.com. That's my website. And then you can, you know, get through my social medias for that, or at Alejandro Writes on Instagram. You know, but yeah, you can just email me through my website. Goes to my personal email, and I check that stuff. So, you know, I still have or try to have a day job. So I'm hopefully going to be a substitute teacher next week, or get my license so I can start substituting, you know.
My hats off to you, because the substitutes are needed. I hope that if you are chosen, that they truly appreciate you, compensate you accordingly, because that's one thing that I'm also a very strong proponent of, that educators, whether substitute or permanent, I honestly feel that if they were paid a more livable wage, a lot more would stay in the profession. A lot more would not have to get a side job, because I've seen it a lot. And a lot more educators will not be leaving the profession because they can't make ends meet, or that they don't feel appreciated. So as a mother of a high school student, of grammar school children, I thank you. I wish you the best of luck. I take the last few minutes to once again reiterate some of the things that are going on with National Parents Union. So it's up to you if you want to stay on in the green room, and we could chat a little bit, but if not, it's okay. But I want to thank you very much again, Alejandro.
Thank you.
I'm here. If you ever want to share some more of your poetry, of your spoken word, let me know, and I'll be happy to bring you back. If you want to further delve into other conversations about education and what it is, the experience of a person that wasn't born in this country to then try to get equitable quality education as well, I'll be happy to have that conversation with you too. And also something else that I know I feel very strongly about, and you probably do so as well, the importance of bilingual education. Yep. Regardless of the other language or languages, the importance of it for our future generations, so that they don't lose that piece of their heritage, their history. If you want to talk about that, déjame saber, and we'll do it.
Of course. Yeah. We'll do
if you have any parting words for any of our viewers, any little nugget of, based on what we talked about, you have the floor.
No, thank you so much for bringing me on. Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, I'm always open. And like I said, it might take me like a little bit to get back to y'all. But yeah, whatever, I'm open to building with folks and you know, and doing whatever. So I know a lot of teachers hit me up They're like, can we use your poems in our classrooms? Yes, please feel free to use the poems in your classrooms. Just give me credit. That's the only thing I ask as an artist. But yeah, feel free to use them. I think in terms of, I do get like a lot of teachers who are ELD teachers or teaching English as a second language, or working with like a lot of like refugee immigrant populations that my poems seem to fit, or my experience, 34 and writing about experiences that I had in 3rd or 4th grade when I first moved here. And I'm like, wow, like that's sad that like it's great that people still find them relatable, and also sad, at the same time, because means things haven't changed much, right? So, but yeah, feel free to do that, or get in contact with me. But thank you again for having me on.
Oh my gosh, thank you. And for anyone that wants to look at it again, I just put the link for the YouTube in the chat as well. If you feel, because 3 minutes goes by so fast, and if anyone is like me, I saw it several times because there were so many things in that poem in itself that a lot of young people would get a lot of information, a lot of things that'll make them think. So I thank you so very much for that. You have a wonderful rest of your week.
Likewise, and congrats on the new position, and we'll see you around.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care. Well, I hope that this was enjoyable for everyone, as much as it was enjoyable for me. I hope that you will share this conversation with your families, with your children, about this. This is very important. Words are powerful. Words affect change. Words can really determine how people treat us and how we treat each other. So please, if you have any thoughts, any comments, if you enjoyed this conversation, share this. The more that is shared, I feel that more people will then be part of the conversation and change the narrative and realize that words can affect, words can change things, and words can sometimes hurt. It's all based on the context that it is used in. Some words should not be ever used again, and there are quite a few that I wish people would not use. We are all human. We are all human beings. We all deserve the right to be respected, regardless of the color of our skin, our ethnicity, our nationality, our beliefs, or for those that do not believe. We should all respect each other. And if that were to occur, I honestly feel that a lot of the things that are happening right now would not be happening if that modicum of respect was around a lot more. So I lead by example. I show by example. So my hope is that all of you do the same thing. I appreciate all of you, for those of you that tuned in, that had a comment that said hello. Hiya, Haida. I appreciate you logging in as well. Again, for anyone that is interested in being a part of the National Parents Union, please go onto our website, www.nationalparentsunion.org, and it is free to join. You can be an individual member or an organizational member. Also, once again, for all of you that are celebrating National School Choice Week, let's continue the conversation, continue the celebration, continue to really be a champion of choice, of options for anyone that is in need of some assistance and is not sure of what's being offered. Please go onto the National Parents Union website, and we are collaborating with great schools with any type of guidance that you may need if you are unsure of what your options are in your community. Please reach out. Please stay safe, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you next week. I'm going to have a very interesting guest next week. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I hope you join me again. Thank you so very much.